My name is Valerie Mantz. I'm a high school teacher, grades 11 through 12, in Fannie Lou Hamer in the Bronx. I think like the rest of the city, we were taken by surprise at the shutdown, I think, because I think we had thought it would blow over, and the week before we were shutting down, we started to prepare kids that we might be shutting down. We gave them some extra work to take home and so forth in case there was, in case from one day to the next, everything had changed. And then we got the notice that schools were going to be shut down, although teachers still worked an additional week in the school. Preparing for remote learning and preparing packets for kids and making sure students had technology available and so forth. And so we spent a lot of that time contacting students just to see how they were doing and to see what they needed so that they could transition to remote learning. At the time I was teaching seniors, so the big concerns were, of course, prom and graduation and what would happen with them. And at the time in March, we assumed that by June, things would have sort of normalized again, and perhaps we would have the chance to have both of those events happen. As you know, they did not. And it was very disappointing for students in their last semester to just sort of end, a little bit with a whimper. Although we did everything we could to make it special for them. There was a graduation caravan at my school where teachers drove to students' homes, delivered their cap and gown, had them pose for socially distant photos, and handed them their diploma. So we made it as special as possible. But it was difficult. And as you probably know, COVID-19 hit the Bronx terribly hard, and many students lost family members. So for a while, every day or every other day, we would hear of another student who had lost someone. So it was a very difficult time for everyone. And we spent most of our time just contacting students, making sure they were okay, making sure they had what they needed, making sure they had sufficient food, or if they needed anything else, that we were there to help them with it. I think beyond just disappointed that they would not be able to see their friends, I think that there was trauma going on because of the loss of family members and the fear, as well as the loss of income for many families. So they were pretty devastated in a lot of cases, and I think that having Fannie Lou certainly meant something to them, but it was a very, very difficult time for everyone. And, I think that it made the future seem very, very uncertain. At a time when they should be looking forward to celebrating their accomplishments and looking forward to college, it wasn't clear whether college would even begin for them in person in September or August. And as you know, it did not. So I think it really, it was really hard. And even though we as teachers, of course, tried our best with remote learning, nothing can replace being in person and talking and really coming together as a community. And, we did our best, but students really missed that, as did we. I think, I got into teaching because I like the exchange of ideas. I like being around students. I like not knowing what anyone will say or what direction we'll go in person. And those things are just a lot harder to accomplish over a screen, where we have to wait for the next person to speak. And there isn't this sort of organic kind of, exchange of ideas that just comes naturally from being together. So that was a hard adjustment, sitting in front of a screen all day for, someone who never really has to do that so regularly. So I missed that, and, and I missed seeing them, and I missed being able to say goodbye as well, and wish them well. Just wasn't quite the same doing it over a screen. Well, I think certainly at the beginning of the summer, it was certainly not clear what was going to happen, whether we would return in person or not. And I think that we spent, at least as teachers, we spent a huge amount of time thinking about how we could organize the school in such a way that we could have a plan in place for remote learning if needed, or a plan in place for in-person learning that might have to go remote. And there were quite a lot of meetings trying to figure out exactly what we should do to prepare. And we also talked a lot about what worked remotely and what did not work, so that we could share best practices and think about, if we did have to do remote teaching, what that would be like and what would be the sort of best approach. And so there were quite a lot of meetings about that. And as the summer progressed, it became clear that we were unlikely to open, or might open briefly and possibly go to remote learning. And so we began to plan more and more for remote learning, which just involved a lot of scheduling and contacting students to find out where they were at in terms of their thinking regarding in-person or remote. And so there were a lot of phone calls made, a lot of outreach to families to see what they needed, how they were doing, what they were thinking about in terms of the new school year. And that work continued through September. As you know, the opening date of school was also changed then. And so oftentimes we're unsure what is coming next. And so we're planning for all these eventualities. And so we are meeting and talking about that and telling students we're starting on, Monday, and then we find out, an hour later, actually, we're not starting on Monday, and then contacting everyone again to inform them that actually the date has changed. And so there's constant contact, constant discussion with families, constant scheduling adjustments. And even within the last month, we began with a certain number of students who wanted to do in-person learning. And that has continually changed. So we have set up classes for students, and then half the students decide that they would prefer to do remote learning. So then we have to readjust the schedule. So even up to today, we are continuing to readjust as more students move to remote learning, others stay in blended learning, and it's a constant sort of movement. And some families have left New York as well. So that is also a thing that we have to take into consideration on a daily and weekly basis. So the way that we're planning is basically we're constantly looking at what's happening, what is working, how are things changing, what else can we do in order to meet students' needs, and, and looking at how it's actually going. So far, we've only had one day of in-class teaching. Classes began yesterday, in fact. So we're looking at how did that go? And do we need to do further adjustment in terms of safety, in terms of numbers, in terms of outreach for students who had indicated they would come but did not come? So it's constant. I would say the communication between teachers and sort of working together has been incredibly important, because we're all a team. So I am reaching out to my partners, to the parent coordinator, to other people who may know the student that I'm teaching this semester, particularly since this year, for example, I'm beginning with the 11th grade who I don't know. So I will reach out to their former teachers to get some insight as to how I might best work with them, since it's much more difficult to get to know someone quickly over a screen. So I think that our strength has really been in our communication with each other, and in thinking of the fact that, to work with a family and work with a student, it's very, very helpful to know certain things about how the student learns going in, to know how we might best be of assistance, even in terms of how parents like to be contacted, or what numbers might a teacher have for a family that I may not have. And so this constant ability to talk to each other and to plan that way. There's also been a lot of collaborative curriculum planning between teachers, so that we are sharing ideas and thinking about what works and what doesn't work, and coming together as a staff to evaluate our teaching. And basically, I think that we feel like we are all working together, and we're all, you know, we all have the same goal, which is to make sure that, you know, students feel educated and loved at Fannie Lou. And so I think that we are doing what we can to ensure that they are receiving the best education we can provide, as well as really feeling like they are part of something, and that we are really getting to know them as individuals and really responding to their individual needs and abilities. In general, I think that, you know, with all forms of art, students are students can see themselves in a lot of different ways, can see their own experiences differently, as well as learn about the experiences of others. And I think that, for example, through primary stages, I have taken many students to see many different shows over the years. And I think each time students came away with just a completely new perspective or idea on a theme or a subject that they maybe had thought about before, but had not thought about in quite that way. And I think that students who may not have ever experienced theater before saw some of their very first plays through this program. And I think that that was really instrumental in helping them understand or know that they really enjoyed theater. There are other students who knew they enjoyed theater and just love the opportunity of seeing different shows from different people. The shows at primary stages are so incredibly different that, you know, it was really interesting to them to see the wide variety of creative endeavors that are out there. And, you know, it was very helpful for them to see that, you know, that they could be a part of it. It's such an intimate theater that we would go to, that really you really felt as if you were a part of what was going on. And I think that the importance of exposing students is oftentimes they don't have the experience and hadn't thought of different aspects of art, and find that they enjoy art in ways that they never had before. Oftentimes students think of themselves as you know, artists are not artists. So if they learned how to draw or know how to draw, then they're artists. But if they hadn't had that experience, they don't necessarily think of themselves in that way. But the more exposure they have to what's out there, and the more different concepts they have of how they can express themselves creatively, really helps develop their ideas, their viewpoints, their voice, so that they can, in fact, experience and connect to the world in different ways. You know, so I think that that's true for all art programming, that you don't know what's going to click with a child, what's going to resonate with them, how they're going to see it or see themselves in it. And I find that, you know, anyone exposed to enough different forms of art will find something that really speaks to them. And I think that, you know, primary stages definitely did that for some students, and almost all, at least, found the experience to be interesting, fun, and motivating in terms of telling their story. I'll make sure that students feel like they're a part of something, and yet that they are also seen as individuals. I'll be here.